Greetings from the bridge. It's a beautiful day on the water, and we're easing into summertime here on the Bohicket River, separating Johns Island from Wadmalaw. I'm the captain, Rick Jones of FishBait Solutions, steering the boat to all things about sponsorship and event marketing, and a whole lot more. We talked recently about Jeff Henderson's book, What Are You For? We told you earlier that the first part of being was being for the customer. At FishBait, we are constantly talking about fans because they're our customers. How to engage better with fans, how to bring value to fans, how to thank and appreciate fans. Because in our business, fans pay for everything. Fans are all our customers. As an agency, we work for both corporations and properties to help them better engage with their fans or customers. Because again, let me repeat myself, fans pay for everything. Sometimes our properties just don't seem to get this, especially in college sports. A lot of college sports administrators think their job is to serve student athletes, and they are half right. The other half is the bank, the fan. One of the best things we can do for our family is to provide our family with housing. But can you imagine the person who does everything for his or her home, keeps it clean, mows the lawn, adds new paint whenever it's needed, but never bothers to pay the mortgage? Well, you're right, they won't be living in that home much longer. College sports better pay a lot more attention to their mortgage holder, their bank, their fans. You have to be for the customer. But then Jeff pivots, and he next talks about being for the team. Because the truth is, you can't take care of the customer without first taking care of your team. Those teammates who actually serve the customer. In our line of work, there are lots of teammates. We have our own staff who serve our customers and our clients. We have the staff of the properties who serve both fans and their corporate sponsors. And we have staff of those corporate sponsors who also serve the fans. That's a lot of teammates. But each is essential to ultimately serving the customer, serving the fan. I like to use the analogy that a great team is like a jazz orchestra. Every member of the orchestra has an essential role to play. They all bring unique talents and skills to the orchestra. But the absolute is that they all have to be playing the same song. A great jazz band allows for talented musicians to freelance and do their own thing, but they still have to do it in the context of the song that everyone else is playing. My role at the agency is to play the band leader and make sure everyone is playing from the same sheet music. There is great joy in watching agencies, properties, and corporate sponsors who collectively do something special to serve fans. Now, I've told you in the past my story about working on the 1994 World Cup soccer championship for MasterCard. And during that period of time, remember, most people thought the only way to leverage soccer in America was to do it by utilizing youth soccer. But we didn't go that direction. We said, no. Look at the World Cup not as soccer, but as a major event that was going to attract a lot of people to the United States. And so we carved out this saying for MasterCard called Welcoming the World to America. Well, what it really meant was welcoming the world's money to America. And we wanted to make sure that a disproportionate amount of the money that was coming to America was going to be gained by using a MasterCard. So in that process, whom did we all serve? Well, first of all, we had to serve the banks that actually issue the MasterCard cards. Then secondly, we had to serve the merchants who accepted the card at their place of business. And finally, yes, we had to service the fans of the World Cup, the fans that would actually use their MasterCard card. The band leader at MasterCard was our client, Mava Heffler, and the lead trumpet player was Lisa Murray, who worked with me. And we had a great team of teammates, including Tony Signore of Alan Taylor Communications, who is now the CEO of what is called Taylor. Plus, we had literally hundreds of MasterCard associates, agency people, banks, merchants, and executives from the World Cup Organizing Committee. The sponsorship was a joy and later was written up by the Harvard Business Review. Great teams have great teammates, period. So how's your team? Are you for your team? You better be. Speaking of great teammates, my special guest is Teresa George, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at the Circle Television Network. Circle is a joint venture between the Opry Entertainment Group and Gray Television. My good friend Drew Reifenberger is the president of the network, which is all about country music and the country lifestyle. Teresa is the consummate teammate and a great juggler because her title says she has to deal with a lot of disparate teammates. Let's spend some time talking with Teresa George from the Bridge. Teresa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you today. Anytime I have a guest, I always start with the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in a little town in Texas called Bridge City, tiny. It had a Dairy Queen, and that was about it.
I've spent a lot of times. My wife says we've done 2 tours of duty in Texas. We lived in San Antonio. In fact, our son was born there, and then we lived in north of Dallas and Plano. But I don't know where that town is. Tell me where it is.
It's between Lake Charles and Houston is the best way to right on the Louisiana line.
Yeah, okay, down there in the bayou.
Exactly.
Lots of humidity, lots of Cajun food, lots of. That's a fun area. I tell people a lot that one of my favorite signs is when you cross I-10 in Louisiana. At the Orange River, right there in Orange, Texas.
Orange, Texas. Yeah. Well, we're the next town over.
Okay, so you cross that thing and it says, "Welcome to Texas." And then I think the next sign says El Paso, 1,150 miles.
I think it's 750. But I would always, and being from Texas, you're always so proud of it. And I would always show my kids that because my husband's from England. And, I said, look, Texas, just the state, is so much bigger than the whole country of England. So, I would always show the kids that sign. I know exactly the one you're talking about.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about music today. And obviously, Texas is just rich with music history. Mm-hmm. This is one thing people may not know about me. I am a collector of Bob Wills albums.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love Texas swing music, and I read a book a few years ago, and it's interesting you talked about your husband. This was a book written by a Brit about his finding Bob Wills. Basically, it was him driving throughout the state of Texas, ending up in Turkey, Texas, but it was the Bob Wills kind of journal, and it was, it's one of those travel logs of all the places that he ate and the characters he met and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But was music always a big part of your life?
It was. My parents, a lot of times, your parents play music and all that kind of stuff. My parents didn't, but my uncle played the Hammond organ and played in clubs. And so I can remember, and my parents didn't find out this till years later, but my grandmother had one of those, big cars back then with the big hood, and she would take all us grandkids and we'd go down to the bayou where the honky tonk was, and she would let the grandkids lay out on that hood and listen to that music coming out of that honky tonk. Because, back then, a lot of them, even back then, didn't have air conditioning, and, air conditioning was common, but back then, a lot of those old places didn't. And so you could really hear the music coming out into the parking lot. And I remember just laying up on the windshield and listening to that music. And that my uncle was playing in that band. And, as a kid, just loving it and thought, boy, that's just awesome that you could do that. And then, spent so much of my life, sitting on band equipment on the side stage, but in much bigger venues. So anyway, it ended up coming full circle.
Well, I've been to some fun places in Texas. Green Hall is one of my favorites, where you two-step and drink
Oh, yeah.
long necks and just, have a great time. I think somebody told me one time, I don't know if this story is true or not, but there was a kid that was played. He was a student at San Marcos College, which is now Texas State, and he was playing in the house band at Green Hall, meaning the backup band. And one day he told the lady that ran it he was going to go to Nashville and do a demo. Guy's name was George Strait. So it worked out for him.
Yes, it did.
It worked out. Well, did you go, when you got out of school, did you go immediately to work in the music business, or where'd you start?
No, I didn't. I went and got a journalism degree, and my dad was super worried about it because and I remember so plainly, we were going to go we went to the next town over in Orange, and we were going in a Taco Bell, and they had a sign up for night manager, and Dad said, and it said how much it paid, and Dad was like, a night manager at Taco Bell is going to make more than you with a journalism degree, and he was really worried about it. But I got a journalism degree at Sam Houston State, which was Dan Rather's alma mater.
Yep.
And came back and was going to try and find a job in TV because I loved TV, but didn't get a job in TV. But the editor of the newspaper in our local, in Orange, called me and said, we've got a position open. And I went and did that for a year and a half. And at the time, it was voted by Time Magazine as one of the best small newspapers in the country. So it was just this great experience, just writing every single day. And then, I moved to the East Coast, and, I was in hard news the whole time, and did some television and, different things, and then decided, you know what, I want to get in the music business. That just sounds fun. And so I moved to Nashville, rented a U-Haul, put it on the credit card, and moved to Nashville, and decided I was going to work in the music business. And I didn't really even know anybody. So I applied at the CMA, and I'd read in the newspaper they had a position open, and applied there, and kind of went up and down Music Row handing out my resume for a bit, and got that job at the CMA. And that kind of, set the trajectory of my life for decades.
Well, talk about that, about what you did at CMA.
Well, it was
that first
amazing
job.
Because I got to town in '88. In May of '88, and the class of '89, and they talk about this class of '89 was Garth Brooks, Vince Gill, Travis Tritt, Alan Jackson, Clint Black. And so that
bunch of nobodies.
Yeah. I mean, that class just really, changed country music profoundly. And it was this incredible surge all through the 90s. And so I worked there all through the 90s. And that was when they were really doing a lot internationally. So we had a London office. We had, people in Sydney and Amsterdam. And so I was going, all over the world, with the CMA board, and that was amazing. And I was running their PR, and then eventually their marketing and membership, and doing a lot of their creative services, running that too. So it was just a really fun time. And Vince Gill was hosting the CMA Awards during that time, and so that was an amazing experience, and I'd graduated from college in 2.5 years. So I was really like, in my 20s and getting to do, all of that, which was, from a small town, and you're getting to do that. It just felt kind of unreal.
Well, it's interesting. We tell a lot. We have a lot of young listeners because we've done a really pretty good job of promoting the show back to college sports and entertainment management majors. And I tell them all the time, don't come to me and say you have 5 years of experience when you really just have 1 year of experience repeated 5 times. You were in a job at CMA where probably every day you got to do something different.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was so amazing. Literally Vince Gill would be calling, sometimes like, hey, what do you think about this song? Or, we'd be talking songs for the award show, or I would be, in London meeting with some media people. It was just like this, we're flying to LA or New York, to meet with CBS. So yeah, it was, every day was different, and it was just so fun because as a journalist, I also was doing the magazine. So I was getting to pick who I wanted to interview and who I wanted to talk to. And so I was getting this amazing education of the music business by talking to people that were my heroes, and to really get that kind of experience and learn it from those people was just such a blessing, and I knew, sometimes people go, well, I didn't realize what I had until it was over. It's like, no, I knew
Yeah,
that
you knew all
I knew
along,
it,
didn't you?
and I
Yeah.
wanted to enjoy and really appreciate it in the moment. And I did.
Well, you sound like you were a real sponge. You mentioned Clint Black. I talked earlier about the fact that I love Bob Wills. There was a tribute album. In fact, there were several tribute albums that Asleep at the Wheel did with contemporary artists around Bob Wills' music, and Waylon Jennings had written a song that was kind of a slow ballad called "Bob Wills is Still the King." And
Yeah.
on this one album, Clint Black does a Texas swing version of Bob Wills is Still the King that may be still one of my favorite songs of all time. That voice was made for Texas swing music. But boy, during that era, really country music, that was the big explosion. It was the combination of country and a little bit of pop and crossover and just a whole lot of things that went there. So then what do you do?
Well, I ended up after 11 years working there, which was a great experience. I had two kids back to back. And I decided to leave. I left and started my own company. And I'd really gotten, kind of made some relationships at CBS, working on that show for so many years and being creative consultant on the CMA Awards. So I left there, and my first client was the Opry. And they were doing a special for CBS, and they had not really done one in the past. And so they asked me to come in. And so I was literally flying back to LA for those meetings and doing some of that. And then at the same time, that was going to last like 6 months because we were really kind of preparing everything and then taping. And Vince and Dolly hosted that show for CBS and helping with the marketing, helping them get a radio deal. So I was doing all of that for them. And then about that time, I had lunch with Sarah Traherne, who's now the head of the CMA. But back then she was working out there at the Nashville network.
Yep.
And so she said, you
Working
know what?
with my good friend David Hall.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And so anyway, she said, you know what? You need to think about going to work for the Academy of Country Music. I said, in LA? No, I'm good. No thanks. And she said, no. You really need to think about it because Rat Clark, Dick Clark's son, American Bandstand and all of that. If you remember, I know you remember Dick Clark. Well, it was his son had just become executive producer of that show. And Rack had at one time, he asked me to go to lunch. I really didn't think he knew who I was that much, but he asked me to go to lunch and offered me a job as a producer. And it was going to be working straight nights, evenings on a live TV show. And I loved the idea of working for him, but it just wasn't the right move. I wasn't ready to leave CMA. And she said, you need to give Rack a call. And I didn't. I was like, I don't know. So I think she called Rack. Anyway, she connected us, and Rack said, yeah, you ought to think about this. And I was like, well, I'd love the opportunity to work with you. I always thought he was a great person and wanted to work with him. And then Tim McGraw's manager, Scott Simon, and David Corlew's David Corlew, Charlie Daniels' manager, were running the ACM board at the time. And so they started talking to me about coming on, working for them. And it was amazing because CMA, I loved my time at CMA, but it was very much, very committee driven and, lots of people involved in every decision, and which is all good. You can, that's all a good thing. But it was kind of refreshing because once I started working for them, it was like I'd have an idea and I'd get an email back from Scott Simon saying go. It would just be go. And it was just like no committee, no big discussions. It was just go, and everything was just go. And it was so quick and so entrepreneurial because it's kind of like when you're running behind, you're just like, I don't know, try it, see if it works. There wasn't a lot of downside to trying new things at that point. And so that was really refreshing for me. So I was helped write Farm Aid and finished up this show and then started working for the Academy. And that was just a totally different experience. And I told him, I was like, if you want me, you can have me, but I ain't moving to LA. And so I ended up doing that job. We all said we'd try it for 6 months, and then that was a 17-year run with them.
A lot of our listeners don't know
there.
the difference, but the Country Music Association is headquartered in Nashville, but the Academy of Country Music really sprang out in the I think early 1950s. There were a lot of Western artists, Bakersville, that area, that recorded in Los Angeles and felt like they were kind of looked down on or were not. We laugh, at that time it was called country and Western music. Well, they were the Western side of it, of the house, and formed that. But they always had an award show. But the award show was usually, didn't y'all do it in Dallas and in Vegas in other places, right?
Well, we did it in L.A. For years. It was in L.A. And Dick Clark had a lot of connections with Knott's Berry Farm. So if you remember, it was at Knott's Berry Farm. And then when I started there, it was at Universal Amphitheater.
Okay.
And there wasn't a lot of wing space. There wasn't a lot of, fly space, that you could put, fly those set pieces in and out and up and down and, all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of limiting. But, and you'd have the trolleys come by with fans right through the parking lot where you were trying to credential people. It was fun, but, it had its limitations as far as a production. And they decided, at that point, Bob Romeo was running the organization. He had come in and he was running the organization, and he, and I don't know if you remember this name, but Jack Laymeyer, he worked at CBS Records, Sony Records for years. And they were having some drinks one night after the award show, and they ran out of Crown Royal. And Jack said, we need to go somewhere where they're not going to run out of Crown Royal. and Bob
and
said,
now
okay,
the rest of the story, right?
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is how we made the strategic move to Vegas. And so Bob said, well, where would that be? And he goes, well, we need to go to Vegas. He goes, they never run out of Crown Royal in Vegas. And so at the next board meeting, we have our normal board meeting. And so Jack raises his hand and he said, hey, we need to discuss that idea we had. And Bob's like, what idea? Like he barely remembers it. He said, the one about us going to Vegas. And Bob's like, so we won't run out of Crown Royal? He said, yeah, exactly. And they were like, yeah, that's a good idea. So literally we end up flying to Vegas and doing some site surveys, and we moved to Vegas. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. And we moved, I don't know if you remember, but we moved to Mandalay Bay because we thought, gosh, this is a big arena. We don't know if we could sell that out. And then after 3 years, we sold it out. There was so much demand. We moved over to MGM. And there was so much demand on MGM, we did two. We'd fill up both arenas. And then we had, at the time, it was Blake Shelton and Reba McEntire hosted. And we would drive them over in the middle of the show. It was so crazy. And drive them over in the middle of the show to the other house and then have them come back. It was pretty wild. So anyway, it was a really fun run. But it started because of a glitch in their drinking after the show one night.
Oh, I love that. That's where creativity comes from. I had a buddy named Roy Spence who It was,
GSD&M. I know.
yeah.
Yes.
Roy's a
Yes.
good friend, and he gave a great speech one time. He said, where do ideas come from? He said, drinking. He said, the good news about drinking is the worst ideas just get better. And he said it also creates carpooling because somebody's got to drive you home and you may have a better idea. But he was a big believer in all that. We're talking today a lot about teams. And I used the analogy earlier about, being a band leader, of leading an orchestra where you have to get all of these disparate parts to come together to play the same song. And if I look at your career at CMA, at ACM, and then we'll talk about Circle in a minute, you're a band leader. I mean, you're trying to get all these different folks aimed in the same direction. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, you got record producers, labels, artists, production people, television people, publicists, fans. Ooh, that's a lot of folks. Talk about it.
It is. And I think, one of the things that when I went over to the ACM, we had a strategic planning group, and we started meeting on that. We met at Randy Goodman's house. At the time, he was at Lyric Street. Now he's the chairman of Sony. But we met at his house, and it was about 6 or 7 of us, and we really started diving into, well, who are we, and what is our brand, and Bob Romeo was a big proponent of, we're about the fans, and we started saying, where the CMAs they were kind of the Oscars. We were the Golden Globes, like we were going to, pop
That's
champagne corks and have a party.
Yep.
And we were going to also be about the fans and give the fans a vote. At that time, we created a fan voted award. And so we were really trying to get the industry and the fans and the artists and, kind of all going in the same direction in a way. And that was a lot of fun and a lot of excitement, because we also knew we had to create a lot of value, because it's expensive for those artists to come out to an award show in LA or in Vegas where we were. We're an away game. And so we had to make it fun, and we had to make them want to come, and we had to offer the fans an opportunity to participate, to get their engagement. And so really trying to, to kind of see how is it a win for every stakeholder that you've got. It's kind of fun. It's like a puzzle you're trying to put together. And that's always been kind of fun for me and a challenge. I kind of like those kind of puzzles. And of course, working with a ton of smart people also who love that kind of same puzzle is always great.
Well, we started the show today really talking about being for fans, and in the country music business, hey, fans pay for everything. They buy records, and they buy tickets, and they buy merch. And the fact that y'all were, enlightened enough to realize, look, let's reward fans. Mm-hmm. Let's celebrate fans. Let's give our artists the way to celebrate and reward fans. I think it was pretty interesting. You're now over at Circle. And you're, it's kind of like putting the band back together. I mean, you're doing a similar kind of job that you've got so many moving parts. And we were fortunate enough to work with you on a project that I say there have been a lot of cooks in this kitchen. And this was, in the pandemic when we didn't have any live performances, y'all were able to do a partnership between the Opry and Circle Television to produce the show without fans, but we were able to get Geico to come in and sponsor the green room. And so, we've got Geico, we've got their agency Red Peg, you got us at FishBait, you got the Grand Ole Opry, you got Circle Television, and you got all these Opry artists, and you got to get them all to play together. And you've done a great job with that. Talk a little bit about that project. Well,
thank you. That has been a fun project because, with the artist, one, just keeping these shows going and creating a live stream around the Opry during the pandemic where you could watch a really high quality, beautiful performance of the Opry. Yes, there were no musicians in the background. There were no fans in the front. but you had these artists just singing their heart and soul out for people at a time when they needed that connection with other people. And that was just, honestly, it brings tears to my eyes because we would read these comments in the chat room on social media. They could watch it on TV. But, at that point, when we were so early in our network, a lot of people couldn't get us. Now we're on, Peacock, Zumo, cable, over air. I mean, you can get us most anyway. But back then, you couldn't get us a lot of places. And so people were watching us on social media, and to see their comments about, hey, thank you, this was the bright spot of my week. Or I'm, in the UK and I stayed up in the middle of the night to watch this, and and that was so heartwarming. One, that we were helping deliver something of value to the fans. And it was also valuable to these artists because it was a memorable and even somewhat scary experience to go out there and realize nobody's going to clap for me. This house is empty. And to still do that, and hats off to these artists who kind of took that chance to do it. And then to say, you know what, we want to bring this green room experience and this fun experience that happens at the Opry to people, especially during this pandemic, but also just give us a slice of what's going on behind the scenes, and to be able to bring that to fans through the help of Geico and you guys and Red Peg and all of us kind of working together and managers of artists. That was really a lot of fun.
Well, everybody celebrated the industry. They celebrated the music, and they realized that we wanted to do something back for the fans because, we were hopeful the thing was going to end and we were going to bring fans back. But during that period, one of the things I liked about the Green Room was I think fans realized, artists are really talented, but they got the same problems I got. I mean,
yes.
they're homeschooling kids like we are. They're sequestered in their basement. They're doing this and doing that. And I think it brought a level of humanity and humility, I think, and the artists that they were big time artists, obviously, that participated in this. You mentioned Garth and Vince Gill and others that participated, and so I think it really did. I think everybody won, and that's what you want to do. You want to create something where everybody says they're a winner.
Right. And I do think for the artist, they have such memories. I've talked to some of them, since we started having crowds, and we're so grateful for those crowds and being able to sell those Opry tickets. But they'll never forget playing to that empty house, because it was such a memorable time, and I think they felt like they were really offering a service, and hope to people that, look, there's some things that aren't going to change, and this is one of them. And I'm kind of putting my, my stake in the sand. This is not going to change, and we're going to keep going. And I just appreciate the artist taking a chance to do that. That was brave of them.
It was, the old concept of the circle and will the circle be unbroken? Well, the circle could have been broken. I mean, we could have ended, and we could have said pandemic 1, COVID 1, no Grand Ole Opry, break the record, end of story. But people got together and said, no, we're not going to let it end like this. We're going to continue to be able to do that. I think it ought to be pretty interesting for you if you think about CMA. You had an award show, you had a number of things. That you did, and the ACMs you had a big award show, but Circle is a big old canvas right now. It's you got a network, and so you've got a lot of stuff to play with. Talk about the fun of that.
Well, I do love that because at the CMA or the ACMs, we would do a couple of CBS specials a year. And that was wonderful. I love that. And we did Music Fest, and at ACM we did a festival. So we had a lot going on, but this, I mean, we're launching like 9 shows this summer. And so you've got everything from Clint Black, who you love that mentioned, doing Talking in Circles, and doing an interview show, kind of like inside the actor studio and really talking about their craft. And then, you've got Big Kenny of Big and Rich doing a kind of a Gearheads type show from his garage and traveling all over the country to see, people make crazy creations, all these mechanical, if it flies, glides, floats, rides, he's got it. He's got that covered. And then we just did an event, and I wish you could have come to, with Kyle Petty at the Opry. And he brought a lot of his sports and NASCAR friends. And then he's doing a show for us, an interview show. And I just got the pictures on my phone last week of Pitbull. And he interviewed Pitbull and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Mario Andretti and, Lyle Lovett. I mean, just this eclectic group of friends that he has, that he's kind of doing a show. It's called Dinner Drive with Kyle Petty. And I say it's kind of like comedians in cars getting coffee, but the cars are faster and the food is better.
Well, he's, people forget he is a musician himself and had played. And then years ago, my good friend, the late Christy Atkins, her agency produced a thing called Sound and Speed in Nashville that was the intersection of NASCAR.
I worked on that.
Yeah. And
yes.
Yeah, and you remember that benefited Kyle's charity, the Victory Junction Gang in Randleman, and benefited the Country Music Hall of Fame. And so, he's not he's a guy that has always been connected to the music industry, which I think is kind of fascinating that he's doing this show.
Well, and you talk about full circle with this network, is that when we did the sizzle reel and we played it for people of the show, he ended it with him on Hee Haw, and we were backstage in Studio A where Hee Haw was filmed, and he said, I couldn't have planned this any better. Basically, like, I was on Hee Haw all these years ago, and now I'm working on a show on Circle, and I'm right back where we filmed Hee Haw. Like, that's just, kind of amazing to me. Well, it was really fun for him.
It's interesting. It's all about circles, and what a great name for a network, because it is the circle. It's the past, the present, the future. It's all the great songs, all the great artists, all the great personalities. And so I kind of see you now, maybe not as the band leader, but you're kind of like the chef in this huge kitchen, trying to figure out how to put all these ingredients together in a way that we have something we can all eat.
That's funny. Evan says I'm the mother hen. So I don't know about that, but it has been fun just jumping from one project to the next, and and kind of helping, we have a show, Country Countdown, and being able to, add something and talk to an artist and say, oh, I can get that for this show, and I can help this one with that. And what if we got that? I love that kind of stuff, and being able to work on so many shows. It's just amazing.
Well, we've told the marketing community, and obviously we at FishBait, we're involved in a number of non-rated networks in the college sports side, the SEC and the ACC network specifically. But when you have a non-rated network to begin with, you got to lead with ideas. I mean, you can't sell spots and dots. You can't measure the spots and dots. And so, we're telling everybody that Circle is like this giant omelet station, that the eggs are country music. What do you want in your eggs? I mean, we can make pretty much what you want from a sponsorship standpoint, and the ability to integrate sponsors into programming, into promotions, into content. I think that's exciting.
Well, and that's a great analogy, Rick. I love that analogy. And I think Evan Heyman, our head of content, and Drew, and, the team has just found these really jewels of, great shows. And some of them, have country artists. There's always that lifestyle element. that we stay true to. But like you said, we can throw in a lot of different things in those eggs and make something different out of it. And so that has been really exciting to work on.
Well, I want to leave our listeners with a couple of lessons from your interview today. Number one is, at a point in your life, you just said, this is what I want to do. I'm just going to move to Nashville and work in the music business. And, Wayne Gretzky says you miss all the shots you don't take. A lot of people dream about things, but they don't do them. Mm-hmm. And, you've had this amazing career because you had the guts to just go chase your dream. I think that's the first lesson. Second lesson is it's a whole lot more fun when you work with people. It's just, life's a team sport. You've mentioned so many of the great names that you had a chance to work with, both, behind the scenes and those performers in front of the audience, that I think is really, really important. And so I think there's some terrific lessons today. Hey, listen, we absolutely love working with you, and we look forward to what's next. And we thank you for taking the time to be with us today from the bridge.
Thank you. I've so enjoyed it, Rick. This is so much fun. I sat here and had my coffee. It's just like having coffee with you. So this has been so much fun.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
Okay, today is an actual rant from the old soapbox. Sometimes you have to be a teammate when you don't want to be. That's called being a grown-up. Case in point, wearing a mask on an airplane. Now, let me make something crystal clear to all of you out there. Let me repeat myself, I hate wearing a mask. Last week, flying from Dallas to Atlanta, well, I was late. I do that a lot. I pushed my meeting too late, and I'm driving like a bat out of hell trying to get to Love Field to turn in my rental car, which in this case was a rental truck because it was the only thing I could get on the lot. And I actually parked my truck in the rental car lot at 10 after 6, and I'm trying to make a flight at 10 minutes till 7. Fortunately, I was able to jump on the rental car bus and get to the airport and get through security really quickly because I have clear and TSA pre-check and all that. And then I literally run to the gate only to find the flight's a little bit delayed. And I'm okay, but I'm sweating like a pig. And then I have to get on the plane, yes, and I have to wear that mask as I'm sweating like a pig, that god-awful mask. But guess what? That's what I agreed to do when I booked that flight. And again, when I got my boarding pass. And yes, once again, when I boarded the plane. Of course, then we were delayed from leaving because some idiot on the plane refused to wear his mask. He decided he was simply more important than the rest of us. Dude, when you agree to the rules, then they continue to apply to you like they do to the rest of us. They had to get security to come and get him off the plane before we could leave the gate and get on with our lives. I have a new suggestion for the FAA. Just give the rest of the passengers the permission to kick the guy's ass the next time and remind everyone else who wants to not play by the rules that it will happen to them too. And that's my rant from the soapbox. Since I've been so sour from the soapbox today, let's balance it with something sweet on the road with Rick. Now, I'm not a huge dessert person. I'd rather have that second piece of fried chicken or another buttered biscuit. But there is one exception. I have a weakness for donuts. And as a proper Southern boy, and with apologies to my friends at Dunkin' Donuts, I absolutely love Krispy Kreme donuts. In 1937, a man named Vernon Rudolph bought a yeast-raised recipe from a chef in New Orleans and started making donuts in a building in the historic Old Salem section of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And the rest is history. Now, I grew up in Atlanta, and my Krispy Kreme was on Ponce de Leon Avenue. Now, understand that building, that historic Krispy Kreme building, recently burned to the ground. But the great news is the guy who owns it, you may have heard of him, his name's Shaquille O'Neal. He's decided to build it back just like it was. Now, when you drive by and you see that sign that says Hot Donuts Now, my car automatically pulls in. A few years ago, I taught a night class on Monday nights at the University of South Carolina in Columbia. Well, Columbia is about 2 hours from my house. And that class ended at 9:30 on Monday nights. And now I have to drive all the way back to Charleston. Well, the good news is there was a Krispy Kreme right on my way home where I could grab a cup of coffee and a couple of donuts. My store here in Charleston is on Savannah Highway in West Ashley. I actually started a Sunday school class for my church for 20-something adults in that Krispy Kreme store. Don't want to come to church? No problem. Come to Krispy Kreme. So that you could say that Hot Donuts Now is kind of a religious experience. They also raise a lot of money for charity. They'll sell discounted boxes, like significantly discounted boxes for organizations, then to sell at a markup and make money. And recently they did something very interesting. If you have proof of having the COVID-19 vaccine, you can come by once a day and get a free donut. That's right, each and every day. And that was reason enough for me to get the vaccine. I flew through Atlanta on my way to Dallas and was delighted to find a brand new Krispy Kreme restaurant in Terminal C of the Atlanta airport. It made wearing that uncomfortable mask actually bearable. So what kind of donuts do I get? Well, I love them all, but I'm partial to both the cream-filled and the jelly donuts like my pal Elvis Presley. It's the great Krispy Kreme on the road with Rick. That's a wrap for today. Thanks to my very sweet guest, Teresa George, and to all of you out there who listen each week. I'll hope you'll join us again next week from the bridge.